Into the Russ Joy Show. I'm Russ Joy. Figure that out because smart's also the name of the show. I had no reason, if you're watching on video, I have no reason why I have the second camera set up today, but I do. It is here, and I'm here, and you're here, and that's all that really matters. We have so much to get to on a Friday. Namely, the Flyers and the Sixers both won on Thursday night. My theory of the good sports juju, well, I don't know if it totally panned out last night. 2 wins, 2 teams in this city. We're going to get to both the Sixers win, the Flyers win. We have to talk about whatever the hell is going on around the Eagles again, as it seems like the media continues to just try, scrap and claw their way into getting an incendiary quote out of A.J. Brown. We will get to that a little bit later on as well. Oh, and there's a few other things going on in the city. So we're going to get to a lot today on a fantastic Friday. I hope you're having a great end of your week. Can you believe that we are less than a week away from Turkey Day? Can you believe that we are less than 1 week away from Thanksgiving? I sure can't, but I am very, very excited. It is my favorite holiday. I love Christmas. Let me be clear. Let me be clear. I love Christmas. Christmas is a great holiday. Thanksgiving is right up there, though. There are no expectations. There is nothing that makes you have the agita of, did I get the right gift for this person? Will my kid like this gift? Will my significant other like this gift? You don't have to worry about that. So Thanksgiving is a beautiful time. I actually had a moment today where I absolutely lost my mind. And I thought about it. I'm like, do I share the TikTok video here over on this show? Because then you have double the Russ, which you don't necessarily need, but like double the Russ. I am actually going to throw it out though, because it was a pretty good question. I'll give myself a pat on the back. This was over at my TikTok at Russ Joy. You can go find it over there if you feel so moved by the spirit. But I had the question today: when did you realize that you were getting older? Not old, but at what point did you realize that you were getting older? And the reason that I asked it is because I had that moment today. And actually, I'll open that up to the comments. And if you're on YouTube right now, you will also see I have a link in the description of the episode. If you want to call into today's show, it is in the description of the video on YouTube. I can't put it out on X or it would get rid of the video. I can't put it, I could have, I guess, theoretically put it on Facebook, but I didn't. Shame on me. But if you want to call into the show today with your thoughts on the Flyers, the Sixers, the Eagles, you can do this on your phone, on your laptop, on your tablet, whatever, video on, video off, doesn't matter to me. You can hop on in and let me know what you think about your respective team. Be happy to have a chat on a Friday. I'm going to throw this over really quickly, though, to a video that I put out on TikTok today. Again, asking about when you realized that you were getting older. And the reason that I'm doing this is because it really made me think today. That is part of the whole content game. So for a second here, I'm going to throw this out to my TikTok from earlier today about feeling older. And then you guys can let me know in the comments, when did you start to realize that you were getting older? All right, I think I'm going to do this. I'm going to throw this out to myself. Let's see how this goes. Hopefully it goes okay. We're going to go here. Stop scrolling. I have a question. When did you realize you were getting older? Not old, but getting older. For some people, it's a receding hairline. This isn't receding, by the way. It's always been like this. It's always been a 5 or a 6 or a 7 head. So that's not what gave it away. I'll tell you what gave it away for me today. 1, I got way too excited about getting up early to go to Costco. 2, the air fist pump I gave myself of getting to go in an hour earlier because of an executive membership, that probably gave it away. I then spent no fewer than 10 minutes in the back of the store evaluating 6 or 7 briskets. Well, of course, there was a prime brisket that was 23 pounds, probably won't fit on the big green egg anyway. And I did a cost analysis and I thought about it. And then I realized, oh, the expiration date is before Thanksgiving. I have to put it in the freezer. So I'm evaluating all these things. I'm realizing in the moment I'm getting old. Then I look at 6 other briskets and I'm looking at the fat caps and I'm looking at how thin they get. And I realize this isn't happening. I go and I buy a whole bunch of other stuff at Costco, but the whole reason for going was to go get the brisket. And as I left, I texted my wife and said, I didn't get a brisket. She said, why? And I said, I wasn't happy with the selection. That's another indication of being old. And then I'm thinking to myself, why don't I just treat myself to Chick-fil-A? Chick-fil-A's in the same parking lot. I'll go get a coffee, go get a couple of the chicken biscuit sandwiches. And then I said, no, you know what? I don't need to do that. I don't need the fat. I don't need the carbs. I'm trying to be a good guy. I'm trying to be good before the holidays, right? And then I drive 15 minutes in the totally wrong direction to go support a local business and get coffee from a small coffee shop nearby. I think I'm getting old, but the coffee was worth it. but I think I'm getting old. When did you realize you were getting older? Stop scrolling. I have a question. When did you... So there's one Russ, there's two Russ. Oh wait, hold on. I think I have a way to do this. Let me see if can I do this? Can I? Yes, I can. That's three Russes at the same time. You never needed this much Russ Joy in your life, but here it is. Three Russ Joys at the same time. That's not ideal. All right, so that's never a good thing. Never, ever a good thing. All right, let me get rid of that. So the reason that I asked the question, as I so succinctly put in that TikTok, I don't know what it was today, but I got so excited about the idea of going to look for a brisket for Thanksgiving. And that is crazy. We could have that conversation on the show here. We can expand on that a little bit. But like, I went to go look for a brisket this morning. And like, I did actually get excited. The executive membership thing came back like a couple of months ago where they let you go in the store an hour early. You can go in at 9 instead of 10, like all the peasants, right? Yeah. So I was excited about it. I spent so much time looking at these briskets and I realized that like none of them were what I wanted. I will give a shout out though, the coffee that I had at the end there, Bucktown Beans. If you're out in like the general Pottstown area, it's one of the Coventrys. I don't know which township it is. North Coventry, maybe East Coventry. I don't know. A lot of Coventry townships. Bucktown Beans. They're fantastic. I had coffee there for the first time. I've seen a million people posting about it. They're fantastic. Go support a small business. They were wonderful. But the brisket thing, I am very, very I'm all in on the idea of brisket on Thanksgiving. In addition to, we're doing 2 turkeys in this house. 2 turkeys, not 1, 2. I'm doing a brisket overnight. And then when I transport the brisket into the cooler to rest for a few hours, then I'm taking a turkey that we will have prepared and I'm putting that on the smoker, on the big green egg. And at the same time, my wife is taking another turkey and putting that in the oven because we have a lot of people who come over for the holidays. And it's the first year that I've ever done a brisket alongside 2 turkeys, and we'll see how it turns out. But like, I was very disappointed today at Costco. And then my wife said, well, why don't you check in at the local butcher? And I was like, that's a great idea. And I forgot to do it, but I will do it today. Anyway, the excitement I felt for the extra hour early going into Costco, that's what did it. I was like, oh, I legitimately did this as I was walking in. I scanned my card and I did a fist pump in the air. And I realized that this is how lame have I gotten? I was never cool in the first place. I know that's probably really hard for a lot of you to wrap your head around. I was never cool in the first place. But if there was ever a part of me that was even remotely like not lame, I lost it with the air fist pump going into Costco today, without a doubt. And then probably the 10 minutes that I looked like a psycho going through all the different briskets. There were probably people that were like, what the hell's wrong with this guy? But you have to find the right, if you're going to invest in a brisket, you got to find the exact shape and the exact size of the brisket that you want that's going to be advantageous on whatever you're cooking it on. And I didn't find it today, and I'm hoping that I'll find it later. And if I don't, I'll be very sad. So anyway, getting older. There are people, like the nice thing is like people commented on it, talking about how they saw wrinkles on their forehead, or you got like people talking about how their kids became teenagers and didn't want to spend time. It was very, very eye-opening, I guess. I'm actually going to go to the comments because I see, and I forgot to put the comments on the screen, but there they are. Comments have been pouring in so far on today's show. So let me see. Let's do the tall. I like the tall. We'll block out Chris Webber over here for a bit. Let's see. We've got Casual Warzone guy says, I realized I was getting older when I realized the Flyers hadn't been to a finals in over half of my lifetime. I'm 27 and I was in elementary school the last time the Flyers were relevant. Yeah, it's been a while. It's been a long time. I actually had a memory pop up on Facebook. There you go. That's how old I am. I had a memory pop up on Facebook of like this really big snowstorm freshman year of college, 2008. And I realized that was 17 years ago. I realized that next year I will be at a point in my life where the time from me taking that picture to, a year from now, that amount of time, 18 years, will have been the same as I was like as a human being from being born to being in college. And there's something very weird about thinking about that 18-year arc that I feel like is going to break my brain. Maybe that's why I ended up with the prompt today about starting to feel old. So it's very interesting stuff. Let's see. Ammo23 says, I realized it when I was called sir the first time. That's fair. I think that's fair. Anyway, you guys can keep letting me know about your, what made you realize that you were old. Amy says, I had my kids later in life, but when my 5-year-old's bus driver called me his grandmom, no, Amy, no, Bus driver. Proper etiquette. Oh, no. I'm sorry, Amy. That's horrible. That shouldn't happen to anybody. I'm sure you don't look like a grandma. I'm sure that you don't. That bus driver was just a dope. Unless that bus driver supports the Russ Joy Show, in which case, still a dope, but we'll give just a smidge of grace, but probably not. Okay. I have to tell you, there are a few things that I find absolutely critical to cover on today's show. One of them that I don't find to be critical, but something that I will really quickly highlight because it happened just before we went live with the show, is that the Phillies have come to an agreement on a contract, and it's going to blow your mind who it concerns. It is not Kyle Schwarber. It is not Ranger Suarez. It is, in fact, Garrett Stubbs. So the Phillies have agreed to a split contract with Garrett Stubbs ahead of the 5 p.m. tender deadline. He'll make $925,000 in the majors, $575,000 in the minors. According to a source, Stubbs is out of minor league options, but the Phillies chose to retain some catching depth. That came out from Matt Gelb. So Garrett Stubbs is back in some capacity as part of a split contract. Now, the Phillies have until 6 o'clock. I thought it was 5, but maybe it's 6, whatever, to tender contracts to Jesus Luzardo, Alec Boehm, Juan Duran, Stott, Marsh, Sosa, Banks, Marchand, and then, of course, they got Stubbs. So that was over a list according to Phillies Tailgate. So we will see. I would assume that they're going to tender an offer to virtually all of the guys on that list. I don't know why you wouldn't. So anyway, there's your Phillies note for the show. We are not going any further into that. Now, I will tell you, the person that I wanted to have on today to talk about the Union, I dropped the ball. I totally forgot to message this person. But then I saw, I think the Philadelphia Union right now are in the midst of a press conference. So this guy's down there covering the press conference. So we might talk about it on Monday. Don't forget the Philadelphia Union are in the semifinal on Sunday, their first game in almost 3 weeks, while their organization is also embroiled in a scandal around Ernst Tanner. If you missed the news and notes of the Ernst Tanner of it all, you can go back to Wednesday's show and check that out. Not a lot has come out since then, beyond the initial accusations and then the reopening of the case. So you can go check that out for a little bit more context if you want or need it. Now, Amadeo says next week we'll need a Thanksgiving food tier list. I think that's fair. I could put together a food tier list for sure for Thanksgiving week. As of right now, the plan is to do a show on Monday. It'll probably be earlier in the day, though, because I have stuff going on in the afternoon. Wednesday, there probably will be a show, I think. And I think there will be a Black Friday show. If I only do a show on Monday, and that's my plan, I'll let you know. I really am not positive yet. I can tell you that on Tuesday night, we're going to be doing Snow the Goalie Radio at the Chickies and Pete's at the Parks Casino in Ben Salem. So if you're around on Tuesday, come out and say, hey. There's a good chance Monday's the only show next week. I'm really not sure. We'll have to recap Eagles-Cowboys if anybody cares, which is weird because that actually does get us over to a conversation here. T from the TO3 says Eagles-Cowboys rivalry is dead, right? And so it's tricky because on one hand, I would say, yeah, I think there's like a good chance that we could say that the rivalry is on life support. I wouldn't say that the rivalry is 100% dead, but I definitely don't have the same vitriol. I don't have the same inherent anger towards the Cowboys that I did like when I was in high school. I think a lot of that is just because the Eagles have been so much better than the Cowboys. I think it's because like we have watched the Cowboys just kind of flounder in place for so long. And the Eagles have won 2 Super Bowls, you know, in the not too distant past, right? Like they've had significantly more success. They've been in 3 Super Bowls in the past like decade-ish. So like I don't really find the need to get too hyped up about the Cowboys. Now, I think Sunday's game is going to be a really good one. I think that's going to be like a hell of a late afternoon clash. I believe that's, I'm trying to remember. Is that I think Tom Brady is on the call there, right? It's a Fox game, the game of the week over on Fox. So Cowboys and Eagles, I think will be a good game. I don't think it's going to be a barn burner. I think that like you have to give the Cowboys a little bit of credit in this way. Cowboys defense, especially around the trade deadline, they made some acquisitions. I think that the defense is better than it was to start the season. It's not like an impenetrable force. I think that you still have to give Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb some recognition and like some kudos. I don't think they're an offensively inept team. If we just go off of like point totals from the last 6 games, 37 points against the Jets on the road, 27 points on the road against the Panthers, 44 points at home against the Commanders, 24 points on the road against the Broncos, 17 at home against the Cardinals was bad, but then they rebounded with 33 points on the road against the Raiders this past Monday. So like, I think that they have the ability to put points on the board. To me, this really comes down to whether or not, and this feels like this is going to be the conversation every week. It's just a matter of like, can the Eagles do enough offensively to be dynamic enough to put up enough points to get the win? Because the defense has just been lights out. I mean, week after week after week, we have seen an Eagles defense that looks about as good as any Eagles defense we've seen in decades, like with an S on the end. Big part of that is obviously the acquisition of Phillips. But like, this defense swarms, this defense buzzes, this defense has been nothing short of sensational. All of that said, it's not all hunky-dory in Eagles land. So we're going to get the negative out of the way, and then we're going to go to the positive of the Sixers and the Flyers wins on Thursday night. Let me take you to just a very basic premise that I want to cover with everybody. I am beyond annoyed with what has been happening in Philadelphia with the Eagles and the way that they're being covered. I will tell you that I find the way that reporters are handling the situation around A.J. Brown and around Jalen Hurts, I find the whole thing to be exhausting, okay? I think that there are times where fans accuse the media of trying to drum up controversy, and I think it's unfounded. And then there are times where I have to agree with a very vocal set of fans on social media that there are definitely reporters who are trying to get an incendiary quote. And I think that is where we have officially landed. Because I want to be really clear. At this point in the season, with the Eagles at 8-2, leading the NFC, there is no reason, week in and week out, day in and day out, to ask A.J. Brown for his thoughts on the frustrations on the offense, to ask for his thoughts about the frustration or the reports that there's frustration with Jalen Hurts. There is nothing to gain, not a single thing. The only reason to ask the question is to try to break A.J. Brown. The only reason to ask the question is to hope that at some point he's going to let his guard down and give you a quote to run with for your story, for your show, for whatever. There is absolutely no reason at this point to go up to A.J. Brown in every single scrum and ask, well, what are your thoughts on Jalen Hurts? What are your thoughts on the offense? I saw a quote going around. The question was asked, do you watch other wide receivers in the league? Do you watch other wide receivers? And like CeeDee Lamb, how does he have the success? And A.J. Brown goes, I don't watch because it would make me sad. He's very clearly frustrated with the offense, right? Whether it's the offensive coordinator, the head coach, the quarterback, whoever it is, he's frustrated. That's fine. And I'm sure he's not the only one. Why the fuck are we asking the question every day? What are you trying to get? It's like poking. You're like just poking the bear. And obviously you hope that eventually he reaches out, snarls, and he says something and you get to run with it. And that becomes the big story. There's no reason to ask. Nothing has changed. What has changed? What this season has changed from week 1 to week 2 to week 3, week 4, week 5. What has changed? Certainly what has changed since last week? What happened since 2 days ago when you ask essentially the same questions? What has changed? Nothing. Not a damn thing. We're at a point where people are just trying to get, and Ford is right, it's not reporting, it's tabloid bullshit. That is where we have reached. We have reached a critical juncture where media, reporters, people who are down in the locker room are effectively working as tabloid reporters. They may as well find A.J. Brown getting out of his car, shove a camera in his face, and have the flash go off 40 times before he walks into NovaCare. I don't know what they're trying to accomplish. I have nary an idea. What I can tell you is it is shitty journalism, if you want to call it that. It is a shitty job of trying to report on the team. There is not a single reason to ask the question every day. Oh, Russ, reporters have the right to ask questions of a player whenever they want. That is part of the access. Didn't you used to do that when you would go down to the Flyers locker room? I did. You know what I remember doing? I remember hearing rumors of the Flyers being interested in trading Shane Gostisbehere. And I remember people not asking in the locker room to Shane Gostisbehere if his play was being impacted at all, of his name being thrown around in trade rumors. And I remember going on Snow the Goalie, and I think at the time crossing broadcast, and I would say, Shane Gostisbehere is probably a good candidate to trade. Here are some teams that might be interested. I don't think it's going to work out here. I think there are better places for him to go, yada, yada, yada. You know what I did? I went into the locker room, and one night after a game, I stood me to the microphone. Well, maybe not that close. I don't need to smell the guy's aftershave, but like probably less than a foot away from Shane Gostisbehere. I held my phone up and I asked him, do the trade rumors going around, like your name has kind of been out there in trade rumors, does that affect your play at all? Does it kind of get into your head? I stood face to face with the guy and I asked the question because on Snow the Goalie, on Crossing Broadcast, wherever I think I was writing on Crossing Broad at the time, I had been kind of throwing out this idea that there were a lot of people organizationally adjacent that were talking about the fact that he was going to be a guy that could get traded. You know what I didn't do? I didn't go down every single day to Skate Zone and ask him every single day, hey, did you see this new trade rumor? Hey, what are your thoughts? Do you think the front office doesn't like you anymore? Hey, what are your thoughts on if the coach is utilizing you properly? I didn't do that every day. You know why? I went down, I asked a direct question. I asked it one time and that was it. And then eventually Shane Gostisbehere got traded. That was it. It's not hard. The whole concept isn't difficult. If you want an answer, go down, ask a direct question, get your answer, fuck off. That's it. You don't need to go down every day and ask the same question in 17 different ways to try to piss off A.J. Brown enough that he's going to give you the quote that you want. Just stop. There's no value add. Not a single bit. The only value add, the only people right now who are benefiting from going down and trying to poke A.J. Brown until he gets pissed off enough that he gives you the quote that you want, the only people who benefit are the ones who talk into microphones. And this is it. I know it seems hypocritical because I'm talking about it on the show. I'm not talking about it from the vantage point of, I think A.J. Brown hates it here. I think we should go down and ask stupid questions. No, I'm taking the media to task. The only people who benefit are the ones who now, like if he gives you like a little breadcrumb that he's frustrated, says, I would be, it makes me sad to watch a guy like CeeDee Lamb and see the kind of success that he's having because obviously he wants to dominate the opposition. We talked about it a million times on this show. The only people who benefit are the ones who ask the question and then turn around and talk into a microphone themselves. And then, I don't know. I think A.J. Brown might actually be unhappy here. I think he might be unhappy. He said that he's sad that he doesn't want to watch CeeDee Lamb play because it makes him sad. Like, fuck off. I'm so sick of it. I'm so done with it. There is a point here where you have to look at yourself as a person who is a journalist, a reporter, a podcast host or whatever. You have to do a little bit of introspection at some point and say, am I doing the very best by my readers, by my listeners, by whomever? Am I doing the best by them going down and asking the same questions again and again and again? The answer is no. It's not. The only real reason that you do it is, I don't know, maybe there's a bonus in some of these people's contracts that if they get a certain amount of likes, impressions, retweets, whatever on their social media, that's the incentive. They have a financial incentive that's tied to this kind of bullshit tabloid journalism. That's it. It's the only thing I can think. Because if these people are going down day after day asking the same damn question again and again and again, hoping to piss the guy off enough to get a different answer, if they are doing that because they think it's good reporting, they are fucking dumb. They are legitimately stupid people. That is the only other argument. I would like to imagine that people who have found enough success in this life to get down and to cover the team are not genuinely stupid people. I have to imagine that their motives are financially tied to a bonus. It has to be, right? Has to be. Otherwise, I don't know what they're doing. It doesn't make any sense to me. You can ask A.J. Brown right now, are you frustrated with the offense? You can do it tomorrow. You do it the next day. Guess what? He's probably not going to give you a different answer. And he's getting better at giving answers or giving non-answers because you're asking it every goddamn day. Maybe if you just take a little break from asking the stupid question and try to get the incendiary answer, maybe you'll get an actual answer out of him in a week or two. Ask it every day. You're going to keep getting an essential no comment. Now, I say all this, and he gave you people, you writers, reporters, podcast hosts, whatever you are that are down there in the locker room, he gave you an answer that was, I guess, at least a little bit, ooh, what does he mean by that? Which I hate. I hate it. A.J. Brown got asked a question about his effectiveness, about whether or not he's the same player, the thought that maybe his play has dropped off. And so we'll throw it out because, again, this is an important thing to cover. AJ Brown gave an actual answer. It wasn't a non-answer. So, we'll listen to it, and then you guys can decide, is this fair? Is this not fair? Here's AJ Brown talking about whether or not he's the same player.
What would you say to, there's been speculation out there that you are not the same player you once were. What would you say to those people?
I guess Saquon ain't the same player either.
For those who might not have heard that, he said, I guess Saquon ain't the same player then either. I guess Saquon ain't the same player either. Saquon's production is down this year versus last year when he was setting records. We'll keep going.
But I don't got no. I don't care. Y'all don't believe that.
And he said to them, he's like, y'all don't believe that. You guys don't believe that. Here's the thing where on a human level, I feel bad for AJ Brown. I know that a lot of times people go, oh, these guys are making millions of dollars. Why does it matter? Why do we feel bad? Why do we care? Yada, yada, yada. This guy makes a lot of money to play football. That is true. Guy's also a human being. And he's not getting asked questions about the matchup. There are other clips going around of him saying, just ask me about Dallas. Here's a player, a star player on a team, a guy who has been vital to this team, winning a Super Bowl and having a legitimate chance of going back and maybe even winning another one. This is a human being who's invested in this organization, this team, this community, this fan base, all of it. And instead of asking him questions about the upcoming opponent, this rivalry game against Dallas Cowboys, he's getting asked for like the 40th fucking time this week. Are you frustrated? What do you say to the people who think that you're not the same player anymore? That's the best you got? I get that reporters and writers are asking dumber and more useless questions by the day. I get it. I've been in locker rooms. I've covered a team in Philadelphia. Two. I've gone into 2 locker rooms of professional teams in Philadelphia and written some stuff up or gone on and done shows in the aftermath. The Flyers and the Union, not the Eagles, to be fair. There were dumb fucking questions every time I went into a scrum. Every single time. Because, a lot of times, and this is probably another reason why you get so many of these dumb questions, people are trying to figure out what they're going to write. People have an idea of what they're going to write, and they go into the locker room and they ask questions that are based around the preconceived notion and the kind of ordained idea of what they want to write about that night or later that day. So they go in and they ask the questions. Like, if you ever want the cheat code of, I wonder what insert name of writer is going to be writing about, listen to their questions in the scrum. 9 out of 10 times, that is the lead of their story. That's exactly what they're going for. AJ Brown, do you feel like you are no longer as effective? Then they get the quote, I guess Saquon ain't the same player. And then guess what? They probably go over to Saquon. Saquon, what do you think about, is AJ Brown not the same kind of effective player he once was? And guess what? Saquon probably say, that's a fucking dumb question. He'll say it nicer because Saquon Barkley's a nice guy. And then maybe they go to Jalen Hurts when he's like, Jalen, do you think AJ Brown isn't the same? They do that because that is going to be the lead of their story. That is the whole premise of their story. Again, is that doing right by the readers, by the listeners, by whomever? Probably not. I'm getting annoyed. If you can't tell, I'm getting annoyed with the line of questioning. If the Eagles were 2-8, these questions are fine. You want to find out why production's down at 2-8? Fine. They're 8-2. They are the top team in the NFC. They have a legitimate chance of having home field advantage throughout the NFC playoffs. And instead of focusing on the team on the field, the media continues to go down and ask why AJ Brown isn't happy or doesn't look happy or doesn't sound happy, that he doesn't have rainbows and smiles flying out of his ass and his ears at the same time. I am fed up. What you guys need to do, everyone watching, listening, whatever, you need to hold reporters accountable. You need to ask them to not get the fuck off. Figure it out. Find a different line of reporting. Here's an idea. Challenge the reporters. Challenge the people covering the team. Have them actually write about the games. Have them actually write about the tactics of the game. Have them actually go back to focusing on what's happening on the field. Oh, Russ, that might be a little bit too difficult. Okay, here's another idea. Have them write about year over year, the drop in production of AJ Brown. Have them talk to coaches and people within the NFL to give a little bit of insight. Are AJ Brown's routes, are his route maps changed? Is he running fewer routes across the middle? What are the reasons that might be happening? Is Jalen Hurts not showing a propensity for wanting to throw over the middle of the field? Is Jalen Hurts showing dependency on underneath routes to his tight end? Whatever it is, challenge the reporters to do that. Challenge them to not do tabloid writing and have them actually do the thing that they're paid pretty well to do, which is cover the team and, maybe even possibly offering a little bit of insight into why the team is struggling, or talk to the people that can actually get the answers, or talk to people who can give you an educated reason why the productivity might have dropped. Instead of doing this tabloid bullshit every day.
AJ Brown, why aren't you happy? You don't like being here, huh? Huh? AJ, you don't like being here, huh? Huh? AJ, do you not like Jalen Hurts anymore? AJ, huh? 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 Poke it.
Stop. At some point, just stop. AJ Brown is a much better, calmer, decent human being than many of us are. If you had to stand at your cubicle or stand at your desk or whatever and get peppered by questions day after day after day, the same damn thing. Why don't you get along with Susie anymore? Do you not get along with Tony anymore? Like, why? We haven't seen you and Tony have lunch together in a month. Like, is everything okay there? And ask the question every day. You'd lose your mind. Kudos to AJ Brown for not losing his mind yet. Although I'll tell you, if he does eventually, it'll be the fault of the media. AJ Brown has had every opportunity right now to blow up, and he hasn't done it yet. Kudos to him. Now I'm going to get to one other thing here really quick on this idea of the locker room and what's the right thing to ask? What's the wrong thing to ask? Jason Kelce earlier this week went on to WIP's morning show, and he was talking about the fact that there was a time that he got really frustrated and Lane was really frustrated. And it was a whole thing about how Lane Johnson came out, spoke about how difficult playing for Chip Kelly was and how intense it was and how guys were getting fatigued and how it was an issue. And so Lane Johnson went out publicly and said some stuff. Jason Kelce went out and said some stuff. Lane Johnson went out and said some stuff. And it led to a breakdown in communication between the two who are good friends. And so I actually want to go out there because, I think that this kind of stuff really does matter. So we're going to go out to Jason Kelce here really quick. And I want you to just hear a part of what he had to say. Again, it was part of a very good appearance on WIP's morning show. This is Jason Kelce talking about that weekend, or about that incident, I guess, with Lane Johnson, where things kind of fell apart because of a war of words, essentially, to the media.
I remember reading that, and I'm like, dude, and I went out and said something in the media and said, what does Lane know? Lane's only been with the Philadelphia Eagles. How does he know what it feels like to do other practices? He's only practiced with Chip Kelly. So he's saying something and parroting something from what other guys are saying. And to be honest, I think we're pretty pampered here in Philadelphia. And Lane then made another comment. Lane and I didn't talk for an entire offseason.
Wow.
Lane is one of my best.
Do you hear the reaction there? And I'm going to cut it there. Do you hear the reaction? The reaction was wow. You know why the reaction was wow? Because no one knew. And you know why no one knew? Because there weren't rats. There weren't rats in the organization at the time. There weren't rats in the locker room running off to any media person who would listen to say, oh, yeah, Jason Kelce and Lane Johnson, they've been friends before, but I think their relationship is devolving. You didn't have rats going to the media saying, oh, you might want to look into the relationship between Kelce and Lane Johnson. Very clearly, something is off. Yeah. There weren't rats within the organization who might not even be part of the locker room, but were parroting what was being said by other people. See, the Eagles do have an issue. I will acknowledge the Eagles have an issue. They have an issue culture-wise that there are people who feel empowered enough to go run off to any media member who will listen and gossip. And the other problem is that there are media people who don't have a discernible talent enough to do anything other than tabloid reporting, who can't say, you know what, that's really, whatever. If a guy doesn't like another guy in the locker room, there are other things that we need to cover. There are more important things to cover. You have rats. There are rats everywhere. It's a problem. Unfortunately, it's a problem with this team that very well could go off and play in yet another Super Bowl, maybe even win another Super Bowl. And instead, we're tied up in this drama week in and week out. It's nonsense. And I don't blame AJ Brown, and I don't blame Jalen Hurts, and I don't blame, in this case, Nick Sirianni, and I don't blame Kevin Petullo. I blame the rats in the organization that keep looking for a crumb or a little bit of cheese, whatever it is that makes them happy enough to go run off to the media with A scandal. Oh, there's a scandal. I swear, it's like if the Eagles did an end of season yearbook, they should have the lady who does the voice on the Bridgerton show. Dearest reader, oh, it was a scandalous day when the quarterback who slings the pigskin refused to speak to his former best friend and chose to pass the ball instead to a man who played in Alabama and won an award they refer to as the Heisman. Oh, dearest reader, I suppose we should take a look at that ahead of the matchup this week against the Boys of the Cows in Dallas. That's how stupid this has gotten. You may as well turn it into a Netflix special. You may as well. Now, we will end the negative part of the show. We'll end the negative part and get with a little bit of positivity. I mentioned the Cowboys, and we talked about the fact that the rivalry might not be dead, but it's probably on life support. There are people who definitely think that the rivalry isn't dead, and it happens to be kids. I got to give Jen Frederick a lot of credit over on Fox 29 because she ended up in, I don't know which school this was, but she ended up, I guess, in a Philly school. And in doing so, she found kids hitting punching bags with the faces of Dallas Cowboys players on them. And if you somehow have not seen this clip yet, boy, oh boy, here are Philly kids.
Oh, land Philly.
Have the faces of Dallas Cowboys players. Now, on one hand, we can look at this and say, oh, there's Dak Prescott. On one hand, we can look at this and say, you know what? That might not be the best thing to teach the youth. Maybe we shouldn't be putting the faces of our rivals on punching bags and having small school children beat the ever-living piss out of them. And at the same time, I say, well, it is Philadelphia, and that is okay. You're just kind of getting them to gear up for, when they grow up someday and they hurl horrible insults at those players as they take the field. That's a good thing. Toughens them up. I thought it was actually pretty funny, though. I mean, is it ideal? Maybe not. Is it funny? I think it's funny. You might not think it's funny. I thought it was pretty funny. Kids hitting punching bags with Cowboys faces on them. Okay. Now, out of the negative part of the show. And listen, I meant to get to comments, and there are a lot of comments over here as well. And I could try to get to a few of them, I suppose. Let me do this really quick. Oh, you know what? No, I don't want to do. I'm going to go back to the when did you realize you were old? Let me do that really quick. Tony Louis said, gang warring over who has the best looking lawn in the neighborhood and getting mad when it's not a unanimous vote for me. That one's pretty good. Let me see. There was another one I thought I saw over here. Dee Dee Skinner says, not being able to sleep on my side due to the old back. Oh, I'm old. There we go. We're going to try to stick to the positivity today. Going to try to stick to the positivity. We're trying so hard. Jason Franklin asks, Russ, what are your thoughts on the Eagles becoming an annual Black Friday game? I think it's fine. I selfishly would rather there be an Eagles Black Friday game than a Flyers one because I like spending Black Friday with my family. I do. I enjoy spending a nice long weekend together with the family. I like waking up the next day and turning like leftovers into like some ridiculous concoction that makes me feel like death all day. Like I do enjoy that. Having to go down and do a Flyers game on Black Friday has never really been my thing. I actually do wish, I know it'll never happen, but like I do kind of wish that a league, NBA, NHL, maybe NFL, that somebody would embrace the idea of a midnight game. That would be cool. Like midnight Black Friday game. That would be so neat. There's no way it would happen. I would imagine that has to do with noise ordinances, probably safety, right? Like you don't want people driving at like 3 a.m. to get home. It would not be ideal, but it would be pretty cool to see something like that. Yeah, the Eagles can have Black Friday. I don't care. It has no bearing on my life. I think that's totally fine. Let me see. Okay. Kevin at iRock Philly says, I wonder if Fox Sports will show that clip, the one of the kids beating up the Cowboys punching bags. That's pretty something. Kevin also said this. Remember when Anthony Sanfilippo did his infamous report about Carson Wentz and teammates years ago? That was not Anthony Sanfilippo. That was Joe Santoliquito. Different person. It is offensive to stereotype all Italians together, Kevin. We here at the Russ Joy Show do not in any way, shape, or form condone the stereotyping of Italian Americans as being the same. And we respectfully request your retraction of that, Kevin, with all due respect. Now, if you do want to get in on the conversation today, again, over on YouTube in the description of the episode, I have a link. If you want to hop on the show, you can hop on through your phone, your tablet, computer, whatever, video on, video off. You can offer your thoughts on A.J. Brown, the Eagles, the Sixers, the Flyers, whatever you want. I want to actually take us to Sixers land for a second. I do. I want to take us to Sixers land because the Sixers had a really impressive game. Now, technically, the Flyers finished their game first, won in overtime, and the Sixers were playing in Milwaukee, and their game went to overtime as well, and they won, but it was second. Okay, really quick. I think you started to see a little bit of the vision last night. Now, it wasn't perfect, okay? I'm never going to try to sell you on the idea that there is a perfect plan of how to incorporate Paul George into a game. I am not going to try to sell you on some nonsensical, whimsical idea of what this could look like with Joel Embiid. I'm not going there. We all know that Joel Embiid's health is the ultimate wild card, and really, like Paul George's has been too. But there is something that you can take a lot of solace in after last night's game. One, Paul George looked really good, especially early in this game against the Bucks. And we'll talk about how he got into rhythm. But Paul George had 21 points last night, 5 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 steals, 4 made 3-pointers. It wasn't perfect, but it was a very good sign of what could happen. And there's a reason that I think there's actually reason to believe that Paul George might be on the right track and that they might figure out a way to get him involved. So I want to take you back through Paul George's first quarter, because that is really where, well, first of all, it's where the majority of his points came from, but also because it gives you an idea of how to get the guy into rhythm. Now, one of the things that I've talked about on this show a bunch is that Paul George as a ball handler is vastly underrated. And a lot of that is just because of his size, because of his position. People seem to forget how good of a ball handler Paul George is, especially at his size. But there's another element to this. Him getting the ability to possess the ball, for him to be able to ISO a little bit to start the game, can help him get into rhythm. So I'm going to walk you through it. Paul George had a drive early in this game. Paul George had the ball in his hands where he was able to hit a spot up 3 where the defender actually sagged off him, and he nailed the 3. And then we saw 2 more possessions where Paul George had catch and shoot 3-point opportunities. I think one was from Tyrese Maxey to Paul George, who stepped into it at the top of the arc, pretty far beyond the top of the arc, by the way. And then another one where Andre Drummond pulled down a rebound, was deep under the net, and whipped the ball out to the wing to Paul George, who hit a 3 in rhythm. And, obviously in a perfect scenario, Paul George as a catch and shoot 3-point guy would be massive. Be massive for a few reasons. One, being able to hit those shots is critical to this team's success. Having a consistent threat from downtown, it will certainly pay dividends for this team. The other reason is it makes the defense have to honor the shot. And that's where Paul George can really get you with his ball handling and his ability to slash to the rim. So last night's game, we saw bursts. We saw moments in that game where you could kind of see the vision of how Paul George can fit in. Now, they were not overly reliant on Paul George. He had a very nice game. He had a very nice first quarter. And overall, when you take everything into account, he went 7 of 12 from the field, 4 of 7 from beyond the arc. He did all that in 25 minutes. It was a good, efficient performance from Paul George. Physically, I'd say he looks okay. He doesn't look all the way back. He's still rehabbing. It was a knee injury. He's had injuries over his career. I don't know if he's ever going to look perfect. But I will say that I thought last night there were some real positives to take away from his game. And I'll also point out that Paul George as a defensive presence is somebody that Nick Nurse relied on late in regulation yesterday. We saw Paul George on the court in an attempt to kind of close out the game late. Paul George is still a versatile defender, even if he's not at 100% physically. Okay. But there's another guy that you cannot talk about the Philadelphia 76ers without talking about Tyrese Maxey. And if you're going to talk about the Philadelphia 76ers and do it the right way, you have to acknowledge that Maxey is on an absolute tear to start the season. He has been ungodly this season. And it's not just me saying that. It is the numbers speaking for themselves. And this came up. Tyrese Maxey is the fastest point guard in NBA history to reach 500 plus points and 100 plus assists in a season. I think he's the first Sixers guard to hit 500 points or more in his first 15 games since Allen Iverson. I saw Mike Missinelli put out a tweet yesterday that said something to the effect of, oh my God, Maxey has figured out a way to become Allen Iverson. He just scores at will. Well, you think about Tyrese Maxey last night. 54 points. Now, granted, there was overtime. I think it was at 48 or 49 at the end of regulation. He finishes the game with 54 points, 9 assists, 6 made three-pointers. He had 3 steals. He had 3 freaking blocks in the game. He has been fantastic. I mean, I think we all have kind of rooted for Tyrese Maxey, right? We've all rooted for Tyrese Maxey because he seems like, 1, a really good guy. 2, he's got the smile that can light up a room. And there's something about that kind of infectious positivity that you have to love and appreciate, especially for a team that's been in the doldrums like the Sixers have been, that have had rough seasons like the Sixers have had. The fact that the struggles this organization has had, especially last year when Embiid and Paul George were hurt and the season got derailed and Jared McCain goes down, like it would have been a shame to see Tyrese Maxey lose his smile. He has not lost his smile. Maxey looks like one of the very best guards in the entire NBA. I'm not ready to say, oh, there's MVP consideration. If he plays like this all season, you're going to have a conversation about him being in the mix, in the MVP mix. I wouldn't say that he's like, a leading contender right now, but he has been fantastic. And it's also, once again, taken some of the pressure, some of the heat off of VJ Edgecombe, who last night had 12 points, had 10 rebounds, a nice double-double for the rookie. Again, I think it was very unfair for people to expect that VJ Edgecombe was going to somehow be like a mid to high 20 point per night scorer as a rookie. I think that there's a chance that he'll get back around to that form, but he's still adjusting to life in the NBA. Tyrese Maxey's been incredible. And if you want to know like how much he's leveled up his game, it's important to kind of take a look at his numbers versus his prior career highs, because that is the thing that kind of makes you freak out a little bit. So we're going to go out. Derek Bodner put this one out. This side by side. I don't know if he's actually the one who came up with the graphic. I don't know if he's the one who compiled the numbers, but he put the graphic out. So we're going to give Derek Bodner credit. And if he stole it from somebody else, well, then we're going to take Derek Bodner to task. But look at Maxey's numbers now versus his previous career high. Points per game. His previous high was 26.3 points. So far this year, he's averaging 33.4 points per game. It's insane. Assists are up from 6.2 to 7.9. Made three-pointers per game is up a full made 3 from 3.1 to 4.1. True shooting percentage is up, which is also interesting because I think his volume of shots has also gone up. His true shooting percentage is up 1.3%. His assist percentage is up 5%. That's insane. Absolutely insane. Look at this. This is a guy who has figured out a way, like we talked about him coming into the season and said, oh, he's a star. He could be a budding superstar. Well, he doesn't look like a budding superstar. He very much looks every bit of being a superstar right now. If this is the kind of player you're going to get night in and night out, holy shit. I mean, we need to like erect a statue to Mike Muscala. I know that there have been, talks about doing that before. But remember, Mike Muscala hit a three-pointer in the bubble, right? And that affected the pick that led to the Sixers getting Maxey. So we should all, once again, thank Mike Muscala. Let me see. I think I found, here's the context. Mike Muscala hit back-to-back three-pointers with Oklahoma City to beat the Heat in the bubble. The win made the top 20 protected pick drop to 21st to give the Sixers the Oklahoma City draft pick that they used on Tyrese Maxey. I think that we should have Mike Muscala. Like, listen, if the Sixers ever make an NBA Finals, or it looks like they might win an NBA Finals, Mike Muscala has to ring the bell. I think that we are 100% there. Mike Muscala's back-to-back threes in the bubble, getting the Sixers that pick from OKC and getting them Tyrese Maxey. Mike Muscala maybe deserves a statue outside the arena. Anyway, Maxey's been incredible. Paul George had a really strong night. No Embiid, and they still go into Milwaukee and win. I know that Giannis wasn't playing. Whatever. Still a big win. Still a very good win. Now, we're going to go from positivity there, and we are going to go over to the Flyers, who also had a positive night. I mean, it wasn't a positive night initially, but it did turn out to be a positive night by the time all things were said and done, because the Flyers fell behind 2-0 to an absolutely woeful, dreadful abomination of a team in the St. Louis Blues. I mean, the Blues stink. They stink on ice. That's how they legitimately stink on ice. They're terrible. And the Flyers fell behind 2-0. And you might say to yourself, oh, Dan Vladar was in net. Russ, what about Dan Vladar? You always tell us how good Dan Vladar is. What happened? I wouldn't put either of the goals on Dan Vladar. And in fact, I would say the only reason that this game didn't get away from the Flyers, where it couldn't have even been a winnable game, or the reason that the Flyers were still in this game in overtime, is because Dan Vladar stood on his head. And I want to take you back to something that I've been trying to take you guys to game in and game out, because I think it's really critical. Dan Vladar is putting up bonkers numbers relative to the rest of the NHL. His goals against is now at 2.37, which is 7th in the league. His save percentage is a .911 save percentage. That is tied for 10th in the entire NHL, not the Eastern Conference, the NHL, period. So he is top 10 in both save percentage and goals against. That was his 12th game. He's 7-4-1 this season. That is his 12th game. The most he's ever played in a season was last year. He played 30 games for Calgary. I want to believe that this is going to be sustainable. Maybe not this level of play, but I want to believe that Dan Vladar can actually be a number one starter in this league. He's 28 years old. I want to believe that Dan Vladar could be the guy for this team for at least a couple of years, 3 years, until maybe Zavragan is ready to play, or Bjarnason, or somebody really steps up to the plate and long-term becomes the franchise netminder. But I want to believe that Vladar, what he's doing so far, isn't an aberration. And I think if you go back to the level of talent he was playing against last year, when Calgary was essentially shielding Wolf from having to play the tougher teams down the stretch for Calgary last year, I think if you kind of put all that together and the start of this season, Vladar is an impressive dude. He's an impressive goalie. He has had a hell of a start, and he has been significantly better than I expected him to be, significantly better than I think anybody else expected him to be, and I would venture to say significantly better than the Philadelphia Flyers themselves thought they were getting when they went out and got him in free agency. Vladar has been awesome. He's been bonkers good. Now, Vladar kept them in the game. There were some moments in this game that made my head absolutely want to explode. Like late in the third period, Travis Konechny has an opportunity to put the game away with an empty net, right? He's kind of fading to the right. He just has to get around on a little bit and put the biscuit in the basket, and it would have been a 3-2 win at the end of regulation. Hooray, everybody goes home happy. Instead, he missed the net. Well, he missed the shot. I think he may as well have missed the entire arena with an empty net. And then there was a turnover in overtime, went the other way. Vladar had to make a bonkers save. Again, Vladar stood on his head for 60 minutes plus the overtime. He was fantastic. The guy who I felt the best for last night, though, was easily Travis Sanheim, who has 100% established himself as a top paired defenseman. I don't think he's a number one. I don't think that he's like the guy when you're talking about trying to build a Stanley Cup contender. I don't think he's like a guy that is a true number one defenseman, a bona fide certified killer as a number one defenseman. But I think he's definitely proven himself to be a top pair defenseman. And he's been reliable and he's been durable. And to that, we give him stick taps on the mic. Good job to Travis Sanheim, who nets the game winner in overtime. Couturier was skating alongside him, had the stick on the ice, looked like he was ready to go backhand if the puck came across to him. Sanheim got the job done. Flyers win in overtime. The unfortunate thing is that the Flyers are doing a lot of winning in shootouts in overtime, which I do think kind of speaks to the lack of talent the team has. And I've said all year, like, for better or worse, this team has had their eyes on making the playoffs. I said this last night, and I saw this kind of going around, and we'll get to the Frank Saravalli clip from Snow the Goalie earlier this week. But, like, there are things that I'm seeing right now that I find irritating, that do make me want to pull my hair out. There are things that Rick Taka is doing with the lineup that I would have absolutely gone after John Tortorella for doing. And I keep seeing it, and I brought this up on pregame last night. The fact that Nikita Grabenkin isn't playing every night is mind-blowing to me. I don't know what we're doing. I want somebody. This is where I would like somebody from the media to go and ask Rick Tocchet. And I have access to do this myself, but I happen to host pregame, intermission, and postgame. So I'm not in the locker room. Could I abandon my duties as the host of the Press Row Show to go down and ask? I guess I could. Could I abandon my duties with my big boy job during the day to drive to Skate Zone to go ask Rick Tocchet in a scrum at a practice? I guess I could. That'd be stupid, but I could. My question is, why is Nikita Grabenkin not playing every night or virtually every night. Because the Flyers are in this like third year of this, whatever you want to call a rebuild, a retool, whatever you want to call it. Gurbenkin's 22 years old. He's going to make mistakes. But Gurbenkin to me is a guy who, like, at the very worst is a fourth liner. I think that there's actually some potential upside for him to be a third line guy. Why is he not playing? And why is it that when he does play, it feels like he plays like 7 or 8 minutes a night? And why is it that when the game is over, Rick Tocchet says, yeah, I got to get him more time. I got to get him more time on the ice. But then he doesn't. Then he falls out of the lineup. Like, here are Nikita Gurbenkin's last 5 games. Played against Calgary, 12 minutes and 6 seconds. Okay. At Montreal, 9:41. At Nashville, 8:26. Home against Ottawa, 8:27. And then his last game was against Dallas. At Dallas, played 12 minutes in a game where the Flyers got their doors blown off on the road. Why does it seem like the coach is saying, I need to get him more time, but then when the time actually comes, like when it's actually like, put up or shut up time, he's not playing a lot. I mean, on the season, I will be fair, it feels like he's playing 7 minutes a night. He's averaging 9 minutes and 35 seconds to play as a fourth liner on this team. Is that fair? Is that right? I don't know. I don't think it is. I think that in the midst of year 3 of this rebuild, the Flyers should be heavily investing in trying to develop Nikita Gurbenkin. He's not a difference maker right now. He doesn't change your ability to compete for a Stanley Cup. You have no chance of competing for the Stanley Cup unless everybody else in the sport decides to retire or get explosive diarrhea and forfeit games. Okay? There is no Stanley Cup hope this year for the Philadelphia Flyers. This is supposed to be a year where you're once again trying to build toward something. You're supposed to be trying to develop guys to be ready to take the next steps, to become a playoff team, to become a perennial playoff contender, to eventually become, hopefully, a Stanley Cup contending team. Nick Delorier seems like a lovely guy. Garnet Hathaway seems like a lovely guy. Neither of them have a long-term future in Philadelphia. Neither of them are indispensable. Neither of them are irreplaceable. So why are they in the lineup? Why are they in the lineup consistently? I fully understand that when the month of December rolls around, the Flyers have a lot of games. They have a game, let me see. I feel like it's a ton in a very short period of time. All right. In the first 14 days of December, the Flyers will play 7 games. And of those 7 games, 6 of them will be at home. They have a 6-game homestand. Penguins, Sabres, Avalanche, Sharks, Knights, Hurricanes. And then they're on the road against the Hurricanes on a back-to-back. In the first 14 days of the month, they'll play 7 games. I fully understand the idea of you're going to rotate some guys, especially those fourth line guys. You're going to rotate some combination of Delorier, Gurbenkin, and Hathaway on the fourth line. I get it. But why now? Like, what does Nikita Gurbenkin get from sitting in the press box last night? Their last game was on Saturday, and then they played on Thursday night. It's a lot of nights in between. I don't think you can make the health argument here. I don't think you can. So there seems to be this cognitive disconnect. There's cognitive dissonance between what the coach is saying publicly and what he's doing when he makes the lineup. And my simple point is this. If Gurbenkin isn't good enough to be in the lineup every night or every 3 out of every 4 games, then send him to the AHL and let him play bigger minutes. And if Rick Tocchet and his coaching staff believe that, Gurbenkin is actually more of a third-line guy than a fourth-line guy, then let him go to the AHL and play consistent minutes every night. And when there is an injury or there is a need to shake things up, then bring him back up. I tend to think that Nikita Gurbenkin has a skill set that translates well to the NHL. He's willing to get into greasy, dirty spots on the ice. He's willing to get into battles along the board. And he makes mistakes. And sometimes it does look like he's overthinking and he's not making instinctual plays. That's part of being a 22-year-old player in the NHL. But when you're in the midst of a rebuild, those guys are supposed to be able to make mistakes and to make errors on the ice and to not get chastised for it. I'll give Rick Tocchet this. There's a very clear distinction between Tocchet and Tortorella. Tortorella had moments where he would go out publicly and excoriate a player like he did to Felix Sandstrom and then had to come out the next day or whatever and apologize. He supposedly got into a war of words with Cam York in the locker room. We certainly know that there was beef between he and Sean Couturier. There were times in Tortorella's tenure where he wasn't rainbows and smiles and didn't treat everybody with kid gloves. Sometimes that's good and sometimes it's not. Tocchet is not going out publicly saying Gulbenkian is adult or he's not processing the game enough. I wonder if he's even a smart hockey player. He's not saying any of that. You have to make a determination. Is it good for the 22-year-old kid to be in and out of the lineup routinely, to get 8 minutes, 9 minutes, whatever it is on the ice in those games? Or is it better for him developmentally to be in the lineup every night, still play those same minutes, but be in there every night? Or do you need to send him down to the A and have him play bigger minutes for the Phantoms and have him ready to call up? Like, I don't know. But at this point, I really think they've got to do what's best for the long term of this team. Gulbenkian has a much clearer path to being part of this team longer term than both Hathaway and Delorier, which is not to say that Delorier and Hathaway stink. I don't think that they're garbage players. I don't think that they're AHL players. I think that they are NHL players on a not great team. On a Stanley Cup contending team, Nick Delorier and Hathaway probably don't have a job. I guess I'd say Hathaway probably has a better chance. But on a team like this, yeah, they're NHL players. Gulbenkian has a much better chance of being part of this thing longer term. They've got to let him develop. Let him do it now when the games don't matter as much. Otherwise, like, what is the point of the rebuild? Honestly, like, what is the point? And that gets me to the final thing, okay? That gets us to a final point. Now, if you missed this on Wednesday night, Frank Saravalli was on Snow the Goalie Radio at Chickies and Pete's with yours truly and Anthony Sanfilippo. And Saravalli, I mean, tore into the Flyers rebuild. And if you had any positivity about the Flyers rebuild at that point, by the time you probably got done listening to Frank Saravalli, you might have been ready to go cry into a pillow. So I want to really quickly go over to what Frank had to say on the show the other night. And then once we go from there, I want to react to it a little bit and kind of give you an idea of where I land. Let's first go out to Frank Saravalli. This was on Wednesday night on Snow the Goalie Radio over at Chickies and Pete's. And I want you to just hear what he had to say about the rebuild. Because, you know, while I'm standing here, worked up about Nikita Gulbenkian getting fourth line minutes, Saravalli kind of has more of an existential worry about your team, your town, your Philadelphia Flyers. Let's go out to Frank, and then we'll come back on the other side. It's like a minute or two. We'll come back and we'll have a conversation about what he had to say and if it's fair or not. And you guys can let me know in the comments what you think as well. All right, let's go out to Frank Saravalli with his. But they're not in a race to the bottom for Gavin McKenna. So where do they find that center?
I think you just hit on the fundamental flaw of where they're at right now, which is a team that's not capable of getting to the bottom, that has not necessarily orchestrated this order correctly, in my opinion and view, which should be your only job this year, instead of trying to be competitive, should be to gain one of those 5 to 6 franchise-changing players that exist in the 2026 NHL draft. Period, full stop, end of story. Anything more than that is a fail. That's how I view it. It's black and white, but to me, it's really simple, because if you're not, it's not even just make the playoffs. If you're not in the inner circle of cup contenders, what are you doing? What's the point? For what? Let's go little Ricky Waters. For who? For what? I mean, that's how I look at it. It's in this one particular year, they got a little ahead of their skis in terms of trying to inch this forward in a year where you didn't need to. It's an unforced error.
So you think that those patchwork players that they brought in, those Band-Aid players, they would have been better off just having those guys get filled in with some of the younger guys that were within the organization to...
No, I think you could have unpacked it in a different way. It's not those guys. They're not helping you, hurting you. They're neutral. They're irrelevant. I mean, no offense to them. I'm not carving them. I'm saying the way you think about building your team, you should have maybe pried off a piece or two already. Maybe you should have traded a Konechny when you could have and gotten value. Maybe you should have moved, pick another guy, Tippett or Sanheim or whoever. Whoever it might be.
Could they still do that, though?
They could, but I don't think that's how they think about it.
Well, maybe not.
I know that. I'm telling you, based on conversations I've had, I don't think their thought process was, we better not be picking in the top 5.
Yeah.
And it's a fundamental philosophical conversation. It's existential to me. That's how I view it.
So, I mean, as somebody who was sitting there and somebody who was part of that conversation, I could tell you that, like, I have echoed many of those thoughts for the last few years. Now, I think that Frank's take on the team itself is maybe slightly too harsh, but I think that for the most part, the frustration is there. We talked about this last night on Press Row Show. Bundy and I did pregame, especially, but your whole goal, if you're going to rebuild, and if you are going to sacrifice a couple of years, maybe not to tank, but to be open to the idea of not being a very good team, you need to walk away with some combination of a number one center, number one defenseman, number one goalie. And as things stand right now, after a few years of the rebuild, they don't have any of them. They don't have any. I mean, Zavragan has torn up the KHL. And so the hope is that Zavragan's going to be your goalie. But there's another part in that interview where, Saravalli essentially says plugging and playing a goalie is probably the easiest of those three. And I agree. Flyers don't have a number one center right now. And I don't really see anybody in the organization who could be that guy. Now, I'm a little bit more bullish on Jack Nesbitt than a lot of people are. Admittedly, I am much more bullish on Nesbitt than a lot of my fellow Flyers media people. I tend to think that Nesbitt could actually be a really, really good player. Maybe he won't be a number one center, but I think he could be a number two center, which would still be helpful. And as the second first round pick in this past draft, that would be a hell of a get. I still don't know what to make of Jetlachenko. I'm still not convinced that he's going to be anything really special. I could be wrong. I actually hope I'm very wrong on Jetlachenko. But to me right now, they don't have a number one center. Number one defenseman? Absolutely not. They have Sanheim, who's a number one pair guy, and that's good. They don't have a guy in the pipeline right now who looks like a number one defenseman. That's not good. Okay? Now, sometimes you can get lucky with a Pietrangelo and get a guy in free agency as a number one defenseman. Sometimes you can fleece a dumb team and you can get a number one center like Jack Eichel out of Buffalo. Though remember, Jack Eichel was available because of the desire for that artificial disc replacement in his neck. And he and the Sabres were at total odds, and eventually they dealt him. You maybe could get lucky dealing with a team again like Buffalo, who had a Sam Reinhart, who maybe didn't look like he was going to be a number one center, but maybe a two with some upside. And then that guy develops into being a number one center. The problem right now is that the Flyers have a ton of wings, and Porter Martone looks like a bona fide stud. Like, I am very, very excited about seeing Porter Martone play for the Flyers. I think he's really, really good. I think he's going to be excellent for this team. But you have a lot of wings. You give a lot of money and a lot of term to Travis Konechny and to Owen Tippett. At the time of both of those deals, I was asking the question, why are you entertaining long-term deals, especially for Konechny, who I like, who I think is a good player? Why are you entertaining this if you're in the midst of potentially trying to do a rebuild? Lower the ceiling, lower the floor. To me, that's a guy that you could have gotten some good assets for and maybe could have either turned into another player or a younger player or something of value. And instead, you gave that guy a lot of money and a lot of term, and they thought it was a big culture thing. I think he's a good dude. So, like, I get it. And at the same time, the production hasn't exactly been commensurate with the salary. And so that's kind of tough. I didn't really understand the Owen Tippett thing at the time. I still don't really understand the Owen Tippett thing. Okay. Those are two of your highest paid players, and they both happen to play wing. Your number one center, or the guy that you were banking on being your number one center long-term, ended up having 2 back surgeries. I don't blame Chuck Fletcher. I think that the deal at the time made sense. You don't plan on a guy having 2 back surgeries. I know a lot of people on Flyers Twitter think that Sean Couturier is the worst player ever. I do not agree with that. He's certainly not Selke Sean Couturier. I think he's still a very competent center in the NHL. Is he necessarily worth the money that is being committed to him? Probably not. Is he still a very good player? I think he can be, yeah. I think that over the course of the season, we're going to find out if Sean Couturier still has it or not. I wouldn't say that it's too early to start figuring out what the return is, but I think that Couturier is still a good player. That deal is not going to get dealt, though. So that's 3 players that you would say at the top of your pay scale for forwards probably aren't a critical part of a Stanley Cup contending team or a Stanley Cup winning team. And that's where you find yourself in a quandary, because also with Saravalli, we talked about extending Trevor Zegras and whether it's a good idea or not. And like, I would understand the caution on the Flyers part because Zegras has had injury issues. I don't understand why you would hold off on getting a contract done with him, however, if he could be a point per game guy, even if it's as a wing. Because I think even on like the lowest end, Trevor Zegras is a top line winger. At the very worst, he is a very, very good, like 1.5 winger, where he can kind of go between the top or the second line. And I think that based on what you've given to some of these other guys, it makes sense to sign him. The fact still stands. The point still stands. They have a lot of wings. Martone and Mishkov are probably going to be the focal points of your rebuild. They are probably going to be the focal points of a team if it ever is to contend for a Stanley Cup. They have to figure out how the hell they're going to get a center and how they're going to get a number one defenseman. And right now, I think it's really hard. I think it's very, very difficult to figure out what team is going to take a glut of wings in a trade. Now, if Ant brought this up last night on Press Row Show, but it's like, if you find a team that was supposed to be a contender or was a team that had playoff aspirations, but they decide that they're going to go the other way and get cheaper and try to essentially restart, well, then maybe you could get a team that gets intrigued by some of the Flyers' young players, young wings who are cost controlled for a long period of time. And maybe that team is willing to part with a guy, a center, or a defenseman, but it probably isn't a bona fide number one of either. So I get Saravalli's point. It kind of lit Flyers Twitter on fire. It got people who don't like that show, who don't like our show, and I got them sharing the clip, and I got them sharing some stuff about our program, which is pretty wild. I think Flyers Twitter right now is just at a very frustrating place because the people who are like me, who wanted an actual tear it down rebuild, didn't get it. I wouldn't say it was a total half measure because that's what Fletcher did. I would say that this was like a 70% rebuild. But I think in order for you to get all the way to the bottom, to be able to go get that number one or number two overall pick that you can build your team around, the Flyers did come up short. There's no other way to look at that. They got lucky that Matvei Mishkov fell. If Matvei Mishkov were Canadian, he would have been the number two overall pick behind Bedard. But he was Russian, and there were geopolitical issues, and he was under contract in the KHL, so he fell to the Flyers. They got lucky. That's great. Martone could have probably been an even higher pick, and he fell to the Flyers, and they didn't expect him to be there. And again, I think he's going to be a stud, so I'd rather build around studs and have to kind of figure it out, especially if they weren't intrigued by Hagens, which it doesn't sound like they were. And they passed on centers. Okay. They took Nesbitt, who's a big body, who they think is going to develop into being a really good center. Hopefully they're right. I get the frustration. You will never get me to tell you that everything is rainbows and smiles in Flyers land. You will never get me to gaslight a fan base and tell them that what they are seeing with their own eyes is wrong. I will give you my context. I will give you my opinion. And I will give you an educated idea of where people within the organization and some who are adjacent to the organization feel about that rebuild. And right now, I think everything Saravalli said is fair. I do. And I don't think it's been a perfect rebuild. And I will once again say that I think where the Flyers really went wrong was the fake playoff push with Tortorella that led to them getting the pick that ended up, instead of becoming Zbuyem, it ended up becoming Jet Lachenko. And again, maybe Lachenko ends up proving everybody wrong. And I'd say at this point, 85% of the fan base doesn't believe in Jet Lachenko, which is probably unfair to a 19-year-old kid. If he turns this whole thing around and he flips everything on its head and he proves everybody wrong, good on him. I'd love to see it. Right now, it looks like this team is kind of heading back toward where they have been for a long time, which is hockey purgatory. Now, hockey purgatory usually has a very negative connotation. I'm not ready to give it a negative connotation. I think that they will end up being one of the last teams in the playoffs in the Eastern Conference. But you are one legitimate, like, oh, Dan Vladar came back down to earth and showed you why he's always been a backup. You are one of that away from this becoming a real hockey purgatory where you're picking like 11 or 12. So the Flyers are in a very weird spot, and the Eastern Conference is kind of a mess, and we'll see where it goes. And I want to try to have a little bit more of a positive outlook than a total negative one. But again, I'm not wearing the rose-colored glasses. I'm not drinking the Kool-Aid. I want to see how this plays out. You guys can let me know what you think. So I am going to head out because this show went longer than expected, but it is a fantastic Friday. Hopefully this gave you enough fodder to go into your weekend with. We'll see how the Eagles do against the Cowboys on Sunday. We'll see how the Flyers and the Sixers look. We wish the very best to the Philadelphia Union in their Eastern Conference semifinal game on Sunday. You're actually going to have the opportunity to watch the Eagles Cowboys and then flip over to Apple TV Plus, I guess, and watch the Philadelphia Union in the playoffs. We wish all the Philadelphia teams well this weekend, and I want to wish all of you well as well. Hopefully, I'll see you on Monday for an episode of the Russ Joy Show. If you're traveling next week and you can't check in, that's okay. I won't hold it against you. I'll have an update next week on if we're going to do shows Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, or just Monday and Wednesday. I will let you know. But in the meantime, this has been the Russ Joy Show, and I've been Russ Joy, but you knew that already because you're smart, and it's also the name of the show. Do me a favor, like the video, share the video, subscribe over on YouTube, ring the bell to get notified whenever we go live with the show. If you see clips going around on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, give them a like. And if you like listening in the podcast feed, you can find the show over on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, Amazon Music, and wherever you get your podcasts. So again, thank you for joining me today. I will talk to each and every one of you Monday here on the Russ Joy Show. Bye now.